friend Chad plays the drums in Switchfoot. He wore the shirt the next night at the show in North Florida. And more messages came in. And we heard from people that wrote in on behalf of loved ones or people they cared about. There's someone I want to help, but I don't know how. There's someone I love, and I'm trying to help them, but I feel like I'm losing them. I feel like I'm pushing them away. Do you have any advice? And I guess in those moments, a few emotions, just this feeling of, oh my gosh, we didn't mean for this to happen. We're bumping into all these other stories, and maybe collectively this much bigger story. And yet in the midst of that, this sense of privilege and just gratitude that, wow, that something special is happening. And then also just this feeling of just being overwhelmed, just going, I am not qualified to read these messages. I'm not qualified to answer these questions. I'm a college dropout surf rep who actually kind of sucks at that. Like, I have no business telling people how to live. I'm not healthy. How could I tell people how to be healthy? You know, like just all these honest feelings. And yet as a person, there was a few things I was comfortable just responding with just as a human being. I think it felt important to thank people for their messages, and it felt important to tell people that their questions or their confessions were brave. And it felt important to tell people that their story mattered, and they shouldn't give up on it, and it was worth fighting for. And I hope that they could wake up to a day where life felt worth living, where it felt like it was worth staying alive, because there was things maybe worth staying alive for. And some people didn't need my words because they were finding encouragement or hope in each other's words. They were reading the comments that were starting to stack up on this page and just feeling less alone, or realizing they weren't alone because of what they were seeing. Maybe they felt like they were in this really difficult place, and yet they were reading the words of someone else who had been there or was there. And it was so cool to just see people begin to kind of find this sense of community, or all of a sudden begin to believe, hey, other people struggle with this stuff. And these messages kept coming. We sent some shirts to some other friends, to some other bands that we got to know. I grew up with the guys in Berlin and sent some t-shirts, and they were on tour at the time, and my buddy Dion plays the bass in that band, and I point over there, he stands over there. He's not here tonight, but he stands over there when they play. And basically everywhere Amberlin went for the first year, Dion wore this t-shirt. And so messages would come in every night from people that had been in the room and people that had seen it or read it. And then other messages came in because somebody at school had come in with this t-shirt turned inside out, or they wrote down the URL, or somebody saw it on somebody else's MySpace page, or a band posted a blog about it. And this thing just began to spread, and we began to see the best of the internet, and just people getting excited, people becoming passionate and saying, hey, this story is important, this page is important, this is personal to me, please check this out. And at first, any message from outside of Florida was like thrilling, you know? And then after a few weeks, it was Australia and England and Canada and just other places we didn't know anybody, places where they don't primarily speak English, places where we thought we would never go. How did this end up there? And I ended up quitting my job at Hurley, and in the weeks leading up to that, just began to try to do the homework to point people in good directions, to be some kind of a bridge, to just point people to treatment centers and support groups and crisis hotlines and suicide prevention hotlines, other websites, books that people were suggesting, just to try to create this find help section that we could point people to. That if they needed help and they were willing to take that step, that they could get that help. And if Hurley hiring me at 22 was shocking to a lot of people, I think me quitting at 26 to run a MySpace page was equally weird. And I remember this, like I remember talking to my dad, and he's kind of going, hey, I've known you since you were born. And last I checked, this is what you wanted to do with your life, and it's a good gig, and you're not really capable of doing anything else. And he didn't really say that, but he said, are you sure you want to quit, like to run a MySpace page? And then he asked my mom, like, what is MySpace? And so it was just this moment where not everybody got it. Like, not everybody thought it was a good idea, and understandably. And I think where I was at was, I felt like, hey, somebody else will do my early job, they'll do it better, all that'll be fine, there'll be a line a mile long. And over here was this other thing that was hard to explain, it was hard to define. It felt a lot bigger than me, and it felt like there was a lot at stake. There were stories and there were lives, and we had the chance to do some good, and we had the chance to help some people, and maybe even save some lives, or see some lives changed. And I just felt like that was too special to walk away from. And so that was why I made that decision. And for the first year, we were under the umbrella of another nonprofit that kind of gave us a big brother that we could just ask a million questions. How do you run a charity? What does that look like? What's a budget? What's a board of directors? Why do you have to have those things? What's the U.S. government? Things like this. And then for the last 4.5 years, we've been on our own as a nonprofit, as a 501c3. And at first it was me and this MySpace page and just kind of me, just drowning in just this thing that's starting to happen and trying to keep up. And now it's in this much healthier place, and there's actually 14 of us on staff that share an office in Florida. There's a house full of interns, and our interns are college students who put life on hold and just say, hey, I want to be a part of this work that you're doing, I want to be a part of this conversation. They put life on hold for a semester, and they come to Florida, they go through training in crisis intervention, and they're the ones who primarily continue the conversation by way of responding to the messages that continue to come in every day. Messages, emails, ad replies, notes, letters. And if you add it all up, we've been able to respond to more than 160,000 of these messages. And we found that they've come in from more than 100 different countries. And so what we've learned is, hey, this is maybe not an American conversation. This is maybe not a white people conversation. This is maybe not an emo conversation. That instead, maybe this is part of being alive on this planet. This is part of this condition of being human that we keep waking up to. And the idea that as a person on this planet, you will encounter loss, you'll encounter grief, you'll encounter things ending. There's places, there's moments you'll get stuck in, there's some enormous questions that you're going to get to wrestle with. And you can answer them in your own time, you can ignore them, but we all get to kind of figure out, hey, what is this about? Am I significant? Am I part of a bigger story? Is there a God? What do I make of that? All these questions. And then we've learned about, hey, what does this conversation look like in America? And we've learned that there's roughly 20 million of us who struggle with depression, that untreated depression is the leading cause of suicide, that for us in the room tonight, that is the third leading cause of death. And then the one that really just stopped me and surprised me was the one that said that 2 out of 3 people who struggle with depression, they never get help for it. And so that was the one that suggested that most people who live in this place, they live alone in this place. And I think it points to the stigma, and it points to the shame, and it points to the confusion that I think so many of us, if we were honest, there's times where we wish we could just put a hand up and say, hey, I need a break. I need some help. I need to talk to someone. I'm not doing very well right now. And yet for most of us, those hands don't go up and we don't say those things. And I think we're afraid of being misunderstood. We're afraid of being judged. We're afraid of being labeled. We don't want to be a burden. We buy the idea that, hey, my friends are busy, my family's busy, they have problems of their own, they have enough on their plate. They don't need my stuff on top of it. This is mine to kind of work through. And we buy the idea that, I can't say this out loud, this is just me, I'm the only one who feels this way. And we buy into that. And the last bit there, that stuff is not a lot of fun to communicate. It's not fun to recite those statistics. And yet I think the thing that keeps us going and allows us to want to keep doing this and feel like it's a privilege is that we get to hear stories or even glimpses or fractions of stories of people taking a step toward getting help and lives beginning to change. Maybe it's someone sitting across from a counselor for the first time and talking about the experience of beginning to feel less alone and beginning to feel known and make sense of some things that have felt out of control. let go of some things they didn't know if they ever could let go of. People stepping into treatment. People saying, hey, it used to be the only way I knew how to respond to pain was with pain. It was by hurting myself, and when people found out, when my friends, when my family found out, they didn't understand, that really scared them, but to me that was the only release or relief I could find. But I'm starting to believe that I deserve better. People that in a desperate moment have picked up the phone and called a crisis hotline and just said, I can't be alone right now, I'm choosing to stay alive. And so those are the stories that I think we show up on behalf of and say, hey, this is a conversation that's hopeful and it's possible to change. And I'm going to bring a friend of mine up to share a little bit of his story. And as a side note, it's kind of the theme tonight. A week ago, he had dreadlocks longer than Noah's, and now he is, I mean, he was handsome then, but he's maybe more handsome. So if you guys would welcome my friend Denny.